Hi, this is David, and you may know me from my book from 25 years ago, Be a Street Magician, but I'm here to talk about my new book, my first book in 25 years, which is called All the Best Secrets of the Worst Lying Bastards. It's a fictionalization of the story of my grand uncle, John Wesley Groves, who was a professional card cheat. And his life was contiguous to S.W. Erdnase. He lived roughly in that era. So I'm here in my vast library to tell you about my search for the real John Wesley Groves. I first met Uncle John when I was 6 or 7 years old. We were having a Groves family reunion, and I was playing with toy soldiers, which is what kids did in 1961 if they were boys. And the family was all abuzz because Uncle John might show up. Uncle John was infamous in the family. He had been kicked out of Vegas just in the previous 10 years, twice, for cheating at cards. He was a professional gambling cheat. And when he finally arrived, he swept in with his best friend, his ego, and he kept everybody enthralled with his stories. At one point, he came down to me and he asked me, he said, "I have something to give you." And gave me a 2-pack of playing cards. He told me that they were marked. And then he leaned down confidentially and he said, "Kid, the only way to win is to cheat." That really incensed my mother. My mother was just within earshot, and she said, "What are you telling my kid? Get out of here." And she actually kept me away from him for the rest of my childhood. But for days and months afterwards, I thought, I like to win. Maybe cheating is the way to go. Well, I grew up. I went to college, went to UCLA, became a full-time journalist, and in 1990, I became a full-time magician. In 2010, I started looking into genealogy seriously, and I found this fascinating character whom I had met and had died in 1989. There were fascinating stories about him, and I looked up his daughter, who was in her 70s at the time. Her name was Carol, and Carol was living up in Seattle, and I made contact with her after decades of not having had contact with her, and she had some fascinating stories. I began visiting Carol every June. She was, after all, family. She was and is fairly wealthy. It was about this time that she sent me the box. The box contained 15 or 20 decks of professionally marked playing cards. They were what Uncle John had used to cheat. They were his tools. So I decided I wanted to see how the cards were marked. Carol said that they were marked, that the key to the markings was the way, they were B-back cards, and it was the way that the diamonds met the edge of the cards. The short ends and the long ends. But she did not know exactly, how to tell whether something was an ace or a king. So I brought them to the Magic Castle, and I showed them to magician after magician. Nobody knew how they were marked. I must have showed them 15 guys. Well, I was about to go to Wonderground, and somebody told me, he said, "Well, while you're in Vegas, why don't you look up Jason England?" So I called him up, and he agreed to meet me at Boomers, which is the diviest dive bar that magicians used to meet at. And we sat in a booth in the back in this dark, dingy bar, and within 10 minutes, he told me not only how the cards were marked, but the machine that was used to mark them, the company name that was that marked them, and I learned that they were manufactured before 1965, judging from their tax stamps. Most had been opened and used, but one of them had been worked on, marked, and then rewrapped in cellophane so that John could toss the deck at a mark and say, "Here, open these cards." And the mark would know that the cards were new and untampered with and above suspicion. Now in those days, every major city had a gambling supply house, or 2 or 3. And so what we were able to do is we were able to, Jason was able to find the gambling house and obtain the original records for my Uncle John's marked cards. He had a standing order for cards, marked cards that are marked in this way that cost him $4 a deck, which in today's dollars would cost $50 a deck. These were trim cards. The manufacturer starts with a regular deck of B cards, which has a diamond back design. In a normal deck, the diamond pattern bleeds out the edge in the same way with every card, that is, with a half diamond. In a trim deck, though, a manufacturer uses a powerful industrial cutter to trim a small amount of card from each of the cards. Some cards are trimmed from the left, some cards from the right, some from the top, some from the bottom. What all that cutting leaves are different diamond patterns on each edge. Some are full diamonds, some are half diamonds, some are quarter diamonds, and some are 3/4 diamonds. It is this combination of diamond variations on each edge that tells you the value of each card. Now, it seems unusual not to mark the number cards individually, but only as odd or even. But Jason said that's useful information because you can tell just by even or odd whether someone has a straight. You can tell whether someone has a third king or even a third 10. The more markings that you have to memorize, the easier it is to get it wrong. After all, you don't want to be caught staring. Now, Jason speculates that John used the decks for lowball, which was quite popular in the 50s and 60s. There are many tools in the cheats toolbox, and I have a whole chapter, a long chapter, in my book, All the Best Secrets of the Worst Lying Bastards, which explains the many different ways that cheaters cheat at cards. The book also has 3 high-level card tricks. The first one incorporates 30 years of my work on the 3-card Monte. I do it for adults, even for kids. The second one is an A-can that uses a marked deck and a regular deck. And the third one is some extensive work on a trick that I consider to be the holy grail of card magic. So a lot of people think the A-can is the holy grail of card magic, but it's too hands-on. I have to tell you, the psychological force is a thing of beauty. That is the story of my Uncle John and my pursuit of his story. A lot of the other information on the story, I mean, his time in Leavenworth Prison, his time with a crooked poker game in Los Angeles in the 1940s, getting kicked out of Vegas in the 1950s, is in an article that will upcoming in Magic All magazine, and of course also bits of it in the book. Anyway, thank you for listening, and I was glad to share my Uncle John's story with you.